Veganstore.com is the home of Pangea Vegan Products, the original one-stop vegan shop. Shop for vegan gift baskets, high-quality, no-bull, non-leather belts, unique vegan life supplements, and much more. Since 1995, Veganstore.com has been all vegan, all cruelty-free, and all sweatshop-free. Visit Veganstore.com today. Today's episode of the Our Hen House podcast is also being sponsored by our partner, A Well-Fed World. A Well-Fed World is a hunger relief and animal protection organization chipping away at two of the world's most immense, unnecessary, and unconscionable forms of suffering. The suffering of people hungry from lack of food, and the suffering of animals used and abused for food. Mending our unjust food system is a critical part of solving the world's most destructive and persistent problems. Fortunately, the plant-based foods that promote health and well-being are the same foods that conserve resources to better feed the world, while reducing greenhouse gas emissions and protecting the environment. A well-fed world provides the means for change by empowering individuals, social justice organizations, and political decision-makers to embrace the benefits of plant-based foods and farming. Learn more at awfw.org.
Our hen house is a squawking house. Our hen house is their hen house. Our hen house, ooh, it's a funky fresh house. Our hen house is your hen house.
Hi everybody, this is Jasmine Singer and I'm really excited about today's show. As you know, I've been on tour and last week I stopped in Washington, D.C. where I was able to chat with a couple people about some very exciting new happenings in the world of veganism. And so I'm going to start with a chat I had at a barbecue with Change.org's Poulin Modai, who talked to me all about the burger we were eating and why it was so special. You're about to find out. Welcome to Our Hen House, Poulin.
Thank you.
I'm in a backyard in Washington, D.C. with you, and we're bonding over burgers and other... I have a lot of vodka in my drink right now. Did you have vodka in yours?
I don't drink, so
no?
I am fully accountable for anything I say.
Okay, good. I'm not. Can you be accountable for anything I say?
I'll try my best.
Okay, I appreciate that. So one of the reasons I'm really excited about being here is because we're trying the new Beyond Meat, the Beyond Burger, plant-based burger patties. How many times is the word burger in the title of this? But it's been all over the news, and this is not your first time having it, but this is my first time having it, and this is supposed to be unlike any other veggie burger. So this is you are an experienced the Beyond Burger consumer.
Yes, well, I tried it yesterday, and that was amazing. And so we're at this cookout today, so I decided to buy about 7 packages of it and bring it for everybody else to try, too.
That must have cost you like $430.
They're about $6 each, so maybe not quite that high, but, you know, it's actually reasonable for the taste and the fact that this is only the second place in the country that you can buy them, so...
Yes, that was one of the reasons I was so excited about being here, because it was like a thing that you do in D.C. And so why are they only available here in one other place?
You know, I'm not really sure, but I know the first place they tested it out was Whole Foods, I think, in Boulder. And then this one is actually in Pentagon City. There's a new Whole Foods that opened there that just opened on Wednesday. So I heard that they already sold out a couple times. So I called before I left work yesterday and showed up, and the cool thing, in addition to the fact that I was able to buy so many of them, is that they were actually doing samples directly across from the meat counter. Like, so there's this huge glass case with tons and tons of meat, and then right across from that is a very kind woman who was sampling the Beyond Burger, and I tried it there, and it was just like so much better than I was expecting. Yeah. And because I was carrying so many containers of it around the store, several employees were like, "Oh, have you had that yet? What do you think?" And I told them I really liked it, but I asked them what they thought. And these are people who are not vegetarian, vegan, animal rights people, and they were all like, "This is really, really good," and they were really impressed with it. So, and that obviously they're not the average American because they're working in a Whole Foods, but also you know that they do have opportunities to try like meatless burgers all the time. So it's good to know that despite all of that, they still thought it was pretty outstanding.
So why is this all over the news? I mean, there's tons of veggie burgers that exist in the world. Is this one seems to be built to be more like a beef burger?
Yeah, I think my understanding, not that I have any connection to, Beyond Meat, but my understanding is they're trying to compete much more directly with people who would otherwise buy beef burgers. And so one of the things that they've done is instead of having it be in the frozen section, it's in the refrigerated section. So it's easier to put aside different products that people might not otherwise see. It's quicker to cook on the grill. So I would assume that them launching it in the DC area right before July 4th weekend, I think that hopefully has some good symbolism. And I don't know, it's just like, it reminds me in many ways of what Hampton Creek is doing, where people don't necessarily want the vegan version of something, they just want something that tastes good and happens to be like convenient and delicious. And so that's, for me, that's what I think this is most similar to in terms of that type of thinking of like what kinds of consumers will like it. It's not appealing just to like the vegan vegetarian crowd like a lot of products traditionally do.
Well, it was actually eerie to see it on the grill. Like, it really looked like meat. It almost looked bloody. I guess there's beet juice or something in it.
Yeah, I'm not sure of all the ingredients. Obviously, it's definitely plant-based. But one of the things that's really exciting for me is, so I work at change.org, where people do petitions all the time for, increased vegetarian and vegan options. There was a successful petition that helped get Ben & Jerry's to add their vegan ice cream options. And Kathy Preston actually has a petition asking McDonald's to offer a veggie burger. And for some reason, like, one of the first thoughts I had when I tried this Beyond Burger was like, this would fit perfectly with what a company like McDonald's sells. It tastes good. It seems like anybody who would go to McDonald's for a beef burger would be willing to try this and would not be able to tell the difference, honestly.
Absolutely. I mean, I haven't had meat in, 18 years. This tastes exactly like it was really bizarre. And I had it with a piece of chow cheese, just a cheeseburger. I didn't even put that many fixins on it because that was how I ate it back then. And I just wanted it to be a reminiscent experience. And it absolutely was. So it's the Beyond Meat, the Beyond Burger. You probably don't know this. I'm going to put you on the spot and you don't even know. But do you know if they have any plans for wider distribution?
I asked actually yesterday the person who was sampling Whole Foods, and she said they definitely are planning on rolling it out, but she wasn't sure of the exact timeline. I would be surprised if it's not everywhere by the end of the year, just seeing how popular it's been and how much positive press coverage it's gotten. I can't imagine that it wouldn't be everywhere. I would honestly think that the biggest roadblock for Beyond Meat would just be if they can keep up with demand for it. Because it's not a frozen product, you have to make sure that you're probably getting the manufacturing process right, because you can't just have it sit around for too long.
Well, why do you think that people get behind things like this? Like when it says plant-based burger patty as opposed to when it says, when people talk about cell-grown meat, for example, there's such an ick factor. Why is there an ick factor with that but not with this? Do you have any opinion or insight on that?
I think this sounds more familiar. It sounds more like, it just sounds like more welcoming, like you would be willing to give it a try. I've never had any of the cell-grown things, but for all we know, they taste identical to this Beyond Burger. So it's a lot of, food and marketing and everything, as probably all of your listeners know. It's not just about what it tastes like, it's also the looks and the presentation. When you go to a restaurant, you might be able to make the same thing at home that tastes more or less the same, but you're getting the experience and the look of like the fancy plate with the, everything on it. So I think that's part of it. That's part of what any industry does. They want to market their products, and I think Beyond Meat's doing a good job. And, as somebody who is an advocate for, veganism and kindness to animals, I think the more steps we can make to embrace mainstream products in grocery stores and school lunches, anywhere it is, I think we should embrace that. Whether or not the average listener for you wants to buy this, that's up to them. There are plenty of great options out there, but in my opinion, the more options the better, and then people can just have that many more cruelty-free options.
So I want to go back to change.org. So what is your position there?
I'm a senior campaigner at change.org.
Okay, and we've talked to you in the past about petitions and what makes a petition successful, or my opinion would be just the simplest way of putting it would be a multi-pronged approach, not just not just the petition, but you mentioned the Ben & Jerry's ice cream. This has been a very exciting day for me because not only did I try the Beyond Meat, the Beyond Burger, but I also, for the first time, tried the Ben & Jerry's ice cream, and I also tried Hampton Creek Foods, the cookies that they sell at Target. So it's been like a big vegan orgasm basically all day long. Now, you mentioned that that Change.org had a role in the Ben & Jerry's?
Yeah, there was a couple named Jenny and Doug from Charlottesville, Virginia, and they started a petition asking Ben & Jerry's to add vegan ice cream. Like they knew that there's some sorbets that they had, but they were like, you know what, with so many, so much popularity of coconut milk and almond milk and soy milk ice creams and things, they wanted Ben & Jerry's to be kind of an industry leader in terms of mainstreaming those sorts of products. And so they had a petition. I forget how many signatures it got, thousands of signatures. Senator Cory Booker tweeted it a few times saying how he was so excited and he really wanted that to happen. So he was sharing the petition. And I think eventually it won. I don't know if it would, for all I know, it could have already been on Ben & Jerry's radar that this is something clearly that there's a growing demand for. But the fact that they released 4 different flavors and that they did it in the context of a petition where they can say that consumers want them to step up to the plate, and then they're responding in that way. I think it's a good example for other companies and for consumers to say, traditionally, I think a lot of vegans think everything is let's list the companies you have to be against and all the reasons you're against something. So one of the reasons I really like working at Change.org is because we can encourage people to think about campaigns in terms of sure, there are plenty of things you can oppose, but also think what are you for? So there was also a petition, for example, somebody started to get Amtrak to add more vegan dining options for their longer distance train rides. I think probably more on the West Coast and some of those sorts of things. So they ended up doing that. And there was the petition from a few years back about Starbucks where they used to have the crushed bug, the cochineal carmine sort of coloring in their frappuccinos, and so the woman who did that was I'm not sure where she still is, but she was from South Carolina, and it's I think maybe 7,000 people signed her petition, but it just got people to think about something, and she wasn't trying to be antagonistic or anything. She was just look, there's a crushed bug derived ingredient for a strawberry flavoring. Why don't you just use strawberries or some other plant-based flavoring? So it's if you're a journalist, it's hard to resist a story like that. And it's also from consumers' perspective, the more that you hear that other consumers take it upon themselves to make changes, that continues to be inspiring, because I have, nothing against all the great groups working for sustainable food and animal rights, but it's also good to know that you don't have to wait for those groups to take initiative to do something for you to join, that you can take the initiative on your own to make a change.
Do you think that the Kathy Preston petition has legs?
I think so. I don't know if it's a secret or not, but she actually had a meeting with McDonald's in Chicago, I believe, and that was a while ago, so they haven't committed to doing anything, but I'm positive it's on the radar, and I think just the more people sign the petition, which is at change.org/McVeggie, I think the more they'll see that there's continued interest, and I think things like the Beyond Burger will continue to make a case for why mainstream audiences do want these products. And since the McDonald's petition launched, Steve-O also launched a petition. Steve-O also launched a petition to ask Wendy's to get a veggie burger, and Wendy's has started testing it, and they have it in some of their Ohio locations, and I believe a couple other ones. And last time Steve-O was in Ohio, he actually made a little video of him eating the veggie burger. So that petition is just change.org/Wendy's veggie burger, where you can also see the video that he did. So yeah, I mean, it's inspiring to know that these used to be, I guess, trends, but I wouldn't really look at it as a trend. Now this is just kind of the inevitable direction of the way society is eating, whether it's more people being fully vegetarian or vegan, or just realizing that they should be eating more and more plant-based options for their health and for animals and for sustainability reasons.
And it's just psychologically, too. I think a lot of people, are they get tired, they get burnt out of the constant no, no, no. I remember, my background was in grassroots organizing, and I remember just leafleting constantly with say no to factory farming, say no to and once I started leafleting with like free recipe guides, it was just psychologically so much easier for me. So I love the positivity approach. It doesn't always have to be fighting against, it could be fighting for, which is a simple switch in your mentality, but one that really works. And so I appreciate your insight here. And how do you want people to access you and your work?
Anybody can email me, poolin@change.org. You can follow me on Twitter. It's I am tomorrow. And I'm speaking, I don't know when this is coming out, but I'm speaking at the Animal Rights Conference next week. So I'm doing a workshop exclusively about how to use change.org. We have a new crowdfunding tool that we would love people who start petitions to also use to continue to escalate their campaigns, to get some money for petition deliveries. Maybe they want to do advertisements. Maybe they want to help fund podcasts, things like that. So whatever they want to do, we want to continue to create tools that people can use to win their campaigns.
Cool. It's exciting. I love that. I've seen a lot of petitions land in my inbox that have 25 signatures. Do you just have a final word, any tips for someone to actually make it successful, as opposed to just, one of the many petitions that wind up just being a dud?
I would say, so we do have a team that looks through petitions every single day, so chances are somebody will see your petition on our team and try to reach out to give you tips, but feel free at any point in time. Once you publish your petition, just email me a link, poolin@change.org, and I'd be happy to give you some feedback or have somebody on our team give some feedback. But the main tip would just be, try to be very clear with what your personal connection is to the issue and why other people's support will actually make a difference. Don't assume that people know all of the details, and don't make it sound like you're just writing an article. Make it come from your heart about why it matters to you, because that's really what these companies and elected officials, that's what they want to know, is that you're an individual who's passionate about this issue, and whether you're a constituent or consumer, that's just a really powerful thing.
It's very cool. I love that there's real people there just trying to help you make it succeed. So thank you so much, Poolin. It's getting a little rowdy here, these animal rights folks, but I want to eat more, so I'm going to conclude this interview and say thanks again for joining me today.
Thank you.
While I was in D.C., I was also able to chat with and, in fact, stay at the house of Elke Shandna and Bruce Friedrich. Now, Bruce was just on our podcast a couple weeks ago, and the episode that he was on actually aired while I was in his house. And a letter came through that very day, in fact, while I was sitting in his guest room. And I went downstairs and read it to him, and we decided to just sort of address it on the air. So I think that this was a fascinating conversation with Bruce Friedrich. And so here, once again, is Bruce Friedrich. I am joined now by Bruce Friedrich. I'm actually in Bruce's living room. Welcome back to our hen house, Bruce.
It's great to be here, Jasmine. Thank you.
Thanks for letting me be in your hen house. It's your rooster. I don't know what you would call it, but I'm glad to be here. And it's funny because you probably didn't expect to be back on our show so soon after your last appearance.
I could not be more excited.
Yeah, me too. Same. So I was sitting in your guest bedroom upstairs, and an email came in on the day that last week's interview with you aired, and it was about you and your interview. So I came downstairs and chatted with you about it, and I'd like to discuss it with you on the air, because I have gotten so much positive feedback about your interview, and I, of course, am one of your biggest fans, and I think that the work that you're doing with the Good Food Institute is revolutionary and is, quite frankly, our only hope. No pressure, by the way.
Thank you.
Yeah. So this is the email we got. Enjoy the podcast so much. I'm listening to the Bruce Friedrich interview. Oh, by the way, Bruce, feel free to interrupt me if you want to scream or reply to something as I'm reading this. I'm listening to the Bruce Friedrich interview and feeling a deep sense of conflict and anger welling up inside, a profound and deflating disappointment. I wish that people could see that reaction that you just gave, but I'm just going to leave it between us. Took me a while to identify the source, not sure I have completely. It appears that he has essentially given up on humanity. I am a relatively new vegan, going on 3.5 years, but for me, veganism is the ray of hope that humans do have the ability to shed millennia of violence and brutality, that we are inherently good and there is hope. The Friedrich interview crushed that for me. He has completely rejected the concept of appealing to that enlightened spark within each of us, or so I thought, and has gone strictly capitalist, appealing instead to our gluttonous side.
You know, I read that paragraph when you first sent it and thought that maybe you guys had cut the interview to like 5 minutes from the 40 minutes. I was really flabbergasted by that impression, and I went back and re-listened to the interview, and it was Marianne and I both incredibly optimistic for humanity. So I encourage listeners to go back and listen to the full interview, because I could not be more surprised by this reaction. And like you, I've gotten tremendous positive response from people who had kind of the opposite of this reaction. I certainly am an extraordinarily optimistic person, and in the interview at one point, I say that I expect animal agriculture to go the way of the horse and buggy, and Marianne and I are, it's one of the more sort of optimistic, two people having an exchange of ideas that I can remember in animal protection. So I'm just really surprised.
I am too, and I have a couple questions about what you just said, just regarding this person's take on it and where that might stem from. Just as a new vegan, looking at it from a broader perspective of like, why would somebody listen to an optimistic, positive interview, which I think speaks to all of the hope that we have for how to truly change the world for animals. And I'm just wondering what you think about that. But let me just continue for a minute. He goes on to say, this disturbing thing for me personally is that he may be right. We may, in the end, be, for the most part, selfish and base beings. It appears that he meticulously avoids the concept of veganism in his projects. Do you want to speak to that for a second?
Well, this coming week, I'm going to the Animal Rights Conference, and I'm on, I think, 3 panels and moderating a couple of more panels, and it's kind of all veganism all the time. I've been vegan for 28 years, and I'm definitely not meticulously avoiding veganism in my projects.
So I do want to finish the rest of his letter, but a couple of the exciting things that happened for me while I've been in DC. I was here to review a restaurant for Veg News, which I'm really excited about. But while I was in your kitchen eating your food, I got to try, finally, the Ben & Jerry's vegan ice cream, and I got to try the Just cookies. That's what they're called? Hampton Creek Foods new cookies?
Yeah, people should go to Target and check them out. But and then last night we also had the Just cupcakes from Hampton Creek, which I think they picked up at Walmart. God. I know. So it's really a vegan fest here at the Chan Friedrich household.
Yeah. Well, I can't believe I missed out on that cupcake experience. I'm just saying. But that aside, the reason I brought up those cookies specifically is because they're vegan, because they're Hampton Creek Foods, but they don't say vegan on the package. You just kind of know it. So, and it's at Target, as you just mentioned. And that to me is how we're going to reach people like my meat-eating brother who lives in Kansas. That's, to me, how we're going to change the world, not always putting vegan in big glittery rainbow on the front cover. Of course, I want it there, but that's me personally. And I mean, do you think that just cookies not having the word vegan in those bright glittery letters is meticulously avoiding the concept of veganism?
I don't think they certainly are marketing themselves to everybody, not just vegans, and they're attempting, and I think this is right. I mean, it's certainly true that the Good Food Institute is attempting to compete with animal-based meat, dairy, and eggs, or create the products that compete with animal-based meat, dairy, and eggs by actually being cost competitive, equally convenient, and equally delicious. So that's true. But it's not meticulously avoiding veganism. It's a recognition that unless we compete with animal products on the bases under which people are choosing those animal products, we're likely to be less successful in actually helping animals.
Yeah. Yeah, good point. Let me keep reading. I'm going to reread that last sentence, actually, because it pertains to the next one. The disturbing thing for me personally is that he may be right. We may in the end be for the most part selfish and base beings. It appears that he meticulously avoids the concept of veganism in his projects. Here we go. It's all about tricking us away from animals with a credible lure. On the other hand, I do believe that the plague of denial we see about us is based upon fear. Fear that going vegan means that we lose one of the few anchors we have in life to our childhood and comfort. Providing new sources of comfort can go a long way to neutralizing that fear. So I think that partly what's going on here is the person writing this letter is now kind of branching off from talking about you in your interview and just like the theory of how to approach the masses with veganism. What do you think?
Well, I mean, I think it's certainly true. I guess I think that if our goal is to have the maximum positive impact, we should probably take multiple paths to getting there. So thus far, the animal protection movement has been, I think, extremely effective in raising the concern of all of the myriad concerns surrounding animal protection issues. So pretty much everybody now understands that the way animals are treated on modern farms, the way they're treated in modern slaughterhouses, is morally loathsome, and that anybody who sees it is going to be shocked and revolted. But we need to give people the products that can allow them to align that understanding with their actions. And I think the animal protection movement has not done a particularly good job to date of creating those products. Basically, every survey that's been done indicates that for the vast majority of people, the important things when making decisions about what they're going to eat are price, taste, and convenience. So the Good Food Institute was set up to fill that gap. And we're certainly not suggesting that our way is the only way, but we are suggesting that when the animal protection and the rest of this sort of anti-factory farming movement, whether it's from a sustainability vantage or a climate change vantage or global health or whatever, we've got education pretty well down. Now we need to give people the alternatives. And the Good Food Institute is focused on giving people the alternatives, not as the only path to getting rid of factory farming, but as an integral part of the overall, tableau that's focused on getting us there.
Yeah, well said. And I think that speaks to what this letter writer said about, that is providing new sources of comfort and sustainability and like actual inroads to change as opposed to inroads rather than infighting. I feel like that should be a tattoo or get like on my butt.
Put it on a t-shirt.
Yeah, it's kind of good, right? Okay, the rest of the letter. I suppose we each have our own niche in this struggle. Yes. It did sound absurd, though, when he claimed with need to find accessible sources of plant-based foods as I'm sitting here eating my oatmeal with blueberries and walnuts. So I'm conflicted and don't think I could gush as much as you have over Friedrich and his approach. I believe that change that we see around us is due to public demand, not push from industry, as he apparently does. But I suppose I may live in a fantasy world. Thanks for listening and the wonderful work you do. What do you think about that, Bruce, about his oatmeal and blueberry and walnuts and this person's take on how change is going to happen from public demand as opposed to push from industry?
Well, I think it's going to have to be everything. And, one of the things that we got very excited about at the Good Food Institute, sort of the precursor to the Good Food Institute even being founded, is watching what was happening with Beyond Meat and Impossible Foods and Gardein and Hampton Creek Foods and all of these companies that are raising millions and millions of dollars to create products that will compete on their own terms with animal-based meat, dairy, and eggs. It's really the case that as you create, products like these Just Cookies or the Impossible Burger or Beyond Beef, these products that compete with animal products, that's basically money put into service for animals and the environment and sustainability. And it's not educating people to make different decisions, but it's making it so that the default choice is the choice, to the degree that people choose the Impossible Burger or Beyond Beef or Hampton Creek Foods, Just Mayo or other products, to the degree that people choose those products instead of their animal-based alternatives, that's a victory for all of these issues, and it's a victory that doesn't require sacrifice, and it means that the default choice for people, the choice that's delicious and cost competitive and convenient, becomes the choice that's also animal friendly and aligns with their values with regard to sustainability and climate impact and everything else. That just strikes me as a colossal win, and not as the only arrow in our quiver, but certainly as an arrow in our quiver. And I think that, to a large degree, the animal protection movement has not been, utilizing this very important tool. And that's what the Good Food Institute is trying to do.
Well, it's very exciting. And before we conclude, do you have any theories as to why somebody would have this takeaway from your very positive, what I think is very hopeful and exciting interview? I mean, why would a relatively new vegan feel a deep sense of conflict and anger based on what you were talking about?
Well, I mean, I guess I could speculate, but I don't know. And as you know, I had some discomfiture at the idea of even reading the letter, because my suspicion is that a lot of people will listen to this exchange who didn't hear the original interview. And I did go back and re-listen to the interview, and I hope other people, if you haven't heard it, will do that too, because my impression was the same as yours and the same as Marianne's, and I've heard from probably a dozen people. I know you've heard from some other people, and they all found the interview to be really optimistic and upbeat. So I was surprised by this reaction, disconcerted by the reaction, and I hope that the writer will go back and listen to the interview again, having heard this exchange between the two of us.
Yeah, I hope so too. It makes me think of the whole idea that everything we hear is about us and everything you say is about you. And I'm not sure, I'm obviously psychoanalyzing this person who I've never met, but I'm just wondering what's going on for this person that would be their takeaway. And I guess I think it's sad because I think it's a missed opportunity for embracing positive change. But, if you are the writer of this letter and you want to be, if you have a follow-up, drop us a line. If you are someone else and you want to weigh in, email us at info@ourhenhouse.org. And this is an interesting conversation. Just remind our listeners where they could learn about the Good Food Institute.
Yeah, our website is gfi.org. So Good Food Institute, gfi.org. And you can also find us on Facebook and Twitter, and we hope people will check us out.
Yeah, it's exciting. I'm approximately 20 feet from your kitchen right now, so I'm going to go see what other treats are in there. Thanks for chatting with me, Bruce, and for letting me stay over.
Oh, it's absolutely our pleasure. We're honored to have you here. Thanks, Jasmine, and our cats adore you.
Oh my God, they're so good. I love them. Wait, just tell our listeners their names in like one sentence about each of them.
Rena Ray is our gray cat who is the welcoming committee for our entire household when the doorbell rings. Rena races to see who's there and to welcome them. Angela Davis is our little gray, little tabby cuddle bunny. She sleeps with us every single night. She's less gregarious than Rena, but still pretty gregarious. And then Tigger, the only one, is just the sweetest cat ever. She's a little bit more shy than the other one. She's also our chow hound, so she's the reason that we can't free feed all of the cats. Angela Davis and Rena will not overeat, but Tigger will. But she loves sunning herself upside down, which is about the cutest thing in the history of the world.
Yeah, it's pretty cute. I agree. Well, you have a beautiful family. Thanks, Bruce.
Thanks very much, Jasmine.
And now we're going to cut right to this week's Rising Anxieties with Marianne Sullivan.
Anxieties are definitely rising this week, and in some kind of scary ways. I mean, we're really bringing out the big guns. I think we must be getting somewhere, but they're definitely fighting back. All right, you may have heard about this. If you have, I'm sure you have been horrified. The name of this article, which is in the News Leader from Springfield, Missouri, is, quote, "The Dog Lover," unquote, premieres in Springfield, likely to spark puppy mill debate. And this is about this new movie. And I don't know how high quality this movie is, but it sounds like it might have like pretty decent production values. And it has been financed by people connected to the puppy mill industry. And it's pretending to, well, I don't know whether it's pretending, but it might give you the illusion that it is something that it isn't, because it is about an undercover investigator in a puppy mill, a young woman working for an organization that is supposedly modeled after PETA or HSUS. And it is this movie has premiered in a number of locations around the country, 25 markets, including in Missouri. And so this woman goes into a farm owned by a man who breeds hunting dogs, and there's a romance story, but while she's in there, she's hard pressed to find signs of animal abuse, and instead finds herself plagued by moral questioning. And somebody put a lot of money into this movie, and as I said, they're starting to bring out the big guns, and they acknowledge this guy Forrest Lucas, who's the executive producer. His purpose is to raise awareness about what he perceives as the excesses of animal rights activists. And what he contends is that, for the most part, 99% of the time, people do an extremely good job of taking care of their animals, their livestock. Frankly, that's why agriculture is the number one industry in this state. You don't get that label by doing a bad job, so you can obviously see where this bozo's coming from. And totally opposed to animal rights. Everything they say is a lie. He's quoted, "They are not about animal welfare, they are for animal rights. They want your animals to have the same rights that you have, so your dog could actually sue you, with the dog being the plaintiff." So what would happen then? I mean, the stories these people make up are just like, it's what has happened to our country? Like, I just feel like it's inhabited by idiots. I guess it always has been. Let's see what happens here. Let's see. I mean, this is scary stuff, so let's hope it goes down in flames, because this guy is planning to put his apparently extraordinarily large amount of money into further movies along these lines. So we're going to have to keep an eye on this. And we're also going to have to keep an eye on the National Animal Interest Alliance, which is an industry front group that lobbies against any reforms for animals, but pretends to be for animal welfare. It was founded by a AKC board member, but it also gets involved in issues involving not just dog breeding, but anything really that has to do with animals. And they have hired an animal law attorney, Sarah Chisnell, and so they're on the job preparing their lobbying efforts against everything that we want to have passed. And she's going to be focusing on expanding state and federal outreach by promoting reasonable laws, policies, and regulations to protect animals and the people who care for them. And, full-time attorney, that's she'll be out there fighting for the interests of animal owners, enthusiasts, and professionals through education, legislation, and the courts. So we got to be on our game, folks. Got to be working all the time. They are out there, and they're fighting hard. Finally, we're hearing from the Catholics, from the National Catholic Register, by a column by one Kathy Schiffer. And this is what she has to say: "Animals don't have rights, but we owe them kindness." And she was disturbed because she managed to catch the Mercy for Animals video about Briarwood Farms and the horrible conditions in the eggs that the chickens that are producing their eggs sold to Eggland's Best. It was a recent Mercy for Animals undercover investigation, and she is not from the industry, so she is looking at this and actually being disturbed. She says the video makes a strong case. Egg-laying hens crammed for nearly their entire lives in cages so small the birds are unable to walk, blah, 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 the usual horrors. And she's seen it. Especially difficult to watch, she says, callous workers violently rip birds out of cages and throw them into trash cans to be gassed to death. So what does she have to say for this? She says that the case will play out in the media and the courts. It probably isn't going to play out much in the courts, though, I know efforts will be made. They're trying to file a criminal complaint. And then she says, already a spokesperson for Eggland's Best has expressed concern about possible abuse at one of their facilities, confirming that an independent investigation of their suppliers is underway. So she's obviously enthusiastic to listen to the bullshit being handed out by the industry. But then she gets off the topic, and she goes on to a bigger topic, all of which leads me to ask, do animals have, quote, rights, just as people do? Or is blatant chicken abuse wrong for some other reason? And she goes on and on that animals don't have, well, no, only persons have rights. And despite the hype from animal rights activists, animals are not persons. What does she cite for that? Well, she's Catholic, so she cites, the Bible or something. She contends that Peter Singer claims that animals are persons, which is not, really something he's ever claimed. That's not his thing. He says that he thinks that they have rights, which of course is not his thing either, because that's not, he's a utilitarian and they don't believe in rights, but whatever. But, that's not Catholic. She goes on to say that's just not Catholic doctrine, and that only humans have immutable value as the highest of God's creation, blah, 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 blah. God gave Adam, and by extension all of mankind, the animals for his use. She gets that from the Dominion line, which, of course, it's not an obvious leap. It's a rather huge leap to say that man has dominion over the animals. To saying that God put them here for his use. But, I can't get into this stuff. Like, what do I know? And so then she concludes that we have the right to use animals, but her husband and her agree that there's an inconsistency in feeding birds outside our kitchen window while at the same time eating the eggs of tortured poultry. That means, and here's the line. That means that whenever possible, we have committed to spending the extra money to purchase cage-free eggs. But having just finished enjoying 2 eggs over medium, I'd be hard-pressed to say that those mama chickens had rights which superseded my right to a delicious home-cooked breakfast. Well, bullshit, honey. I mean, these fucking religious people, like, they drive me crazy. Like, do you have rules or don't you have rules? Like, do you do the right thing or don't you do the right thing? Like, if you are saying that it is actually a requirement that we treat animals with compassion, and she kind of is saying that an animal may have no rights upon which we might infringe, but mankind, to whom the animals and all living things have been given by our loving God, has a responsibility to exercise wise stewardship. So then you can't say whenever possible. If you're not allowed to kill people, do you say, like, well, I don't kill people whenever possible? No. If you're not allowed to steal, do you say, I don't steal when it's possible? But if it's not possible, then what do you mean possible? Of course it's possible for you to eat something else. Like you didn't have to eat eggs for breakfast. It's always possible. So you can't say whenever possible. And then you can't give yourself a pass just because it's about animals. That's what they always do. Unbelievable. Jeez, I hate that. I hate that nonsense. Well, those are the anxieties for this week. And as I said, they're rising pretty high. So we better get on our game.
Before we get to today's feature interview, I do want to remind you that Our Hen House is a 501c3 nonprofit organization, and we are reliant on our listeners to support our efforts to change the world for animals. So we hope that you will become a flock member today by going to ourhenhouse.org and clicking on donate. And a flock membership is $15 a month recurring, or a one-time donation of $150, which will make you a flock member for a year. And you'll know that you're keeping our efforts alive to change the world for animals. So we will send you an Our Hen House tote bag. It's ethically sourced and vegan made, and it touts our tagline, change the world for animals. And we'll also invite you to join us in our private flock Facebook group, which is also a lot of fun. You'll be the first to be inside the know of things that are happening for us. And so please go to ourhenhouse.org, click on donate. You can also dedicate a podcast episode or sponsor a podcast episode, which is $200 and will also make you a Flock member. So thanks in advance for that. And by the way, another thing that's super helpful is if you leave us a friendly review on iTunes or Stitcher or however you listen to this. So that just really, really helps us so tremendously. And it allows others to learn about our efforts as well. So that just takes 2 minutes, helps us so much. It brings the attention level of our show to a much more prominent place over at Our Hen House. So thank you so much for that. And I do want to also remind you that I am out right now with a new book, and it's called Always Too Much and Never Enough. And you could learn more about it by going to jasminesinger.com. There's no E on Jasmine. It's just JASMINSINGER. I'm on tour right now. My book is a memoir, and it talks a lot about animal rights and veganism, in addition to many other things, including food addiction, finding peace within your body. There is an ebook. There is a Kindle audiobook as well. So if you want to hear the audiobook, I narrate that, or you could just get the book. So get that wherever books are sold. If you like it, leave a friendly review. If you don't like it, don't say anything. And it's called Always Too Much and Never Enough. You could find it wherever books are sold again, or jasminesinger.com, and find me. I'm on tour this summer. I will be in Los Angeles, in Philadelphia, in Connecticut, and in a whole bunch of other places. So check that out. And you could follow all of the above, Our Hen House and me, on social media. Our Hen House is at Our Hen House on Twitter, on Instagram, on Facebook. I am Jasmine Singer Author on Instagram. I'm Jasmine_Singer on Twitter and Facebook. Just look for Jasmine Singer and you'll find my author page or my personal page, whichever one you'd prefer. So today we have some very special guests, and they are Lindsay and Mike Wolf. Lindsay Wolf is a former undercover investigator who has gone behind the closed doors of factory farms, pet stores, vivisection labs, and other industries to expose animal abuse. She currently recruits and trains investigators for Mercy for Animals, an international animal protection organization that is dedicated to preventing cruelty to farmed animals. You could learn more at mercyforanimals.org. She'll be joined by Mike Wolf. Mike Wolf spent several years working as an undercover investigator with a focus on animal agriculture. His investigations include hog farm suppliers to Smithfield and Hormel, which resulted in dozens of criminal cruelty charges. Mike joined Compassion Over Killing in 2014 as the investigations manager, where he oversees investigative efforts into meat, dairy, and egg facilities. He is also a member of Plant Built's powerlifting team, and you could learn more about Compassion Over Killing at COK.net. Here's Lindsay and Mike Wolf with a fantastic conversation as led by Marianne.
Hello, Lindsay and Mike.
Yes, hello. Hi, thank you so much for having us.
Hi, it's wonderful to be here. Thank you.
Welcome to Our Hen House. And it's just kind of crazy that you each have what seem to be incredibly similar jobs. One of you for Mercy for Animals and one of you for COK. And I have you both here on the line at the same time. And between you, you're pretty much running the show when it comes to undercover investigations. So, Mike, perhaps we can start with you. Can you tell us how you got started, both in becoming a vegan animal rights activist and then in becoming an undercover investigator?
I'd love to. And actually, it all kind of was the same thing for me, both of them. It started for me, it was 2005 when my dog Curly died. And that was just a really difficult time period for me. And it really opened up my eyes to a lot of things. I started learning about how dogs are eaten in other countries. And that really was very disturbing for me. And I was picturing Curly in some of those situations. But then I was still turning around and eating chicken and tuna and everything else. And then it just kind of clicked for me, so I decided to give up eating animals. And very shortly after that is when I went into the field. It's probably a couple of months after that I started working as an undercover investigator.
Wow, that was a very quick transition from meat eater to really committed activist. Lindsay, how about you? How did you get your start?
Well, I was a little bit different. For me, at a young age, I've always been really drawn to animals, and I think that all of us inherently have that as we're kids. but we kind of lose it as we grow up in the society that we do. Immediately drawn to animals. I'm a vegetarian at a young age, which was a kind of a little bit of a battle with my family initially. Now we're better, but so then as I got older, I began to just kind of educate myself on the issues that happen within various animal industries. I would perform my own kind of, in terms of investigations, that started for me because I would perform kind of my own little investigations throughout high school and college into various industries. And then that's what eventually led me to working full-time undercover.
Wow, that's really interesting. I'd never heard of anybody who actually started doing it on their own, and that maybe you started the whole idea of animal investigations.
I wouldn't say that. I wouldn't go as far as saying that.
Like when you're a kid, like what would you do? What would you look into?
It was so it's actually first started at pet stores. As kids, you were a lot of times taken to pet stores, and I would see animals in these cages, and a lot of times I would see them just being not treated very well, whether it's abused by workers, left without food and water, overcrowded cages. So that's where it started. And then I was reporting these concerns to basically local law enforcement about the issues. And then it led into animal agriculture after that point, because it made me think that, if these are the types of things that we're seeing in public areas, what's happening in animal agriculture where the public isn't regularly around?
Oh, you were really ahead of your time.
Oh, thank you. So sweet of you to say.
So how did you two meet?
That is a very interesting story. So we were both working undercover for PETA, and we had known of each other at the time. We had never met, but we knew like when each other's cases would come out. So we would pass messages through our supervisor to each other to congratulate each other. And then one time I was staying at our supervisor's house as I was passing through. We were driving, and she had to text Lindsay, so she handed me her phone to text her, and I just kind of stole her phone number out of her phone.
Undercover investigations to the used in aid of romance.
Probably not the best thing, the smoothest way to do it. But.
So Lindsay, did you marry him just so your name could be Wolf? Because I think that's a pretty good reason.
Well.
Do you find that there are a lot of people in this movement who have animal names? I can't think of them off the top of my head, but I have noticed that in the past that there's an awful lot of animal names. Well, anyway, I'm not sure you can answer that. My mother's maiden name was Fox, so I like to think that I'm partly animal named.
I think it's a really awesome thing. I think it kind of puts that into people's minds subconsciously. When they hear an animal name, it just is pro-animal. Like people are going to be like, "Oh, wolves suck,"
Maybe I should change my name. I have to think about that. All right, so I guess we should get into the topic at hand. And Mike, again, let's start with you. What kind of jobs have you gotten at animal agriculture facilities? Just give us kind of an overview of what do you go in there and do?
Sure. And so when I was in the field, I actually started out, my first job was at a zoo, and then I worked at some companion animal places. And then I worked into animal agriculture. So in animal ag, I've worked with, I had cases with cows and chickens, most of all pigs though. I worked 3 hog farm cases. And when you go in there, you're just, your mind is completely open. You're just walking in there to see whatever you're going to see. You don't have any, assumptions. Obviously, there's standard practices that you're going to see. But, once you get in there, you kind of have to have your head on a swivel. And you just kind of take note of everything that you're seeing. And for the most part, from the first day you walk in and you're seeing just egregious abuses. There's obviously the standard practices, and those happen daily to millions and millions and millions of animals all across. And then you also have these workers who sometimes will be abusing the animals in egregious manners. But in my mind, the standard practices were always worse than the abuse that you see from the workers, because when you have a practice such as castration, where you're tearing into the flesh of a scrotum and ripping the testicles out of an animal, I mean, suddenly punching and kicking really doesn't seem that bad. So I kind of feel like it's a systemic issue that causes these workers to act like that.
Yeah, I actually feel like there's been a shift to some extent in the tenor of undercover investigations, that they are focusing more on just standard practices than on the particularly egregious abuses by one or two workers. Do you feel that the movement of investigations has shifted in that way?
There is definitely a shift in that direction. I mean, I think, if you walk in and you see the egregious abuse, we're definitely going to record it and show it. And I'll actually take this moment to put a little teaser out there. I obviously, for obvious reasons, can't give too many details, but we will be having something coming out fairly soon that I'd like listeners to definitely keep tabs on our website for. And in this situation, there is a ton of egregious abuse. So, I mean, if you're walking in there and you see it, obviously we're going to record it. Obviously, we're going to go to law enforcement. But I think the standard practices are really what makes those workers in their mind justify the fact that they can do that. Because when it's not only your job to do it, like when your boss is telling you to do it, but it's also legal, and you're, mutilating these animals without any pain relief, when you're doing that day in, day out for 10, 20, 30, 40 years, it gets to a point where, mentally you don't see anything wrong with punching and kicking.
Yeah, of course. I mean, it's almost psychological abuse of the workers, and it's got to really do something to people's heads. So what was your first day as an investigator like? Like my first day at any job, even if it's like, like in the most benign job in the world, is kind of, you're kind of a little bit in shock, like adjusting to this new culture. But I can't even imagine what the first day would be like. Was it overwhelming?
Very much so. So for me, it was a really huge life adjustment. I had gone vegetarian, right shortly before that. I was thrown into this whole world of animal rights, which before my dog died, I really did not know anything about. I started traveling for the first time. My first case was in the Midwest. It was at a zoo. So I was working with big cats and bears, and it was really long days. It was very overwhelming. It was very hard manual labor. The first day, it was just a really huge culture shock. And it's something that I think, even when you're talking about not just my specifically first day, but any investigator's first day, you could prepare yourself as much as possible mentally. You could watch as many videos as you can online. But when you first walk into a facility, especially animal agriculture, there is absolutely nothing that can prepare you for that overwhelming feeling. The sights and the sounds of the smells really all hitting you at once. All these animals just screaming in pain and torture and suffering. I mean, there's just nothing that can compare you to that.
Wow. I mean, I can't imagine it, but I can imagine that it's like nothing else that could ever be experienced. Lindsay, how about you? What was your first professional investigation after you finished your career as an amateur investigator?
Well, I went right into pet stores. Was where I first started. And like Mike was saying, nothing really does prepare you for those. A little bit different of a history than him, as I think I was aware of the issues for longer, but it didn't prepare me. It didn't mean that I was necessarily prepared for those. I had spent years watching undercover investigations videos, and I thought I knew exactly what I was going into. But just in the very first day, when you're, especially because we focus a lot on employment-based investigations. So when you're working there, it's very different from when you're just a customer going in and observing things. You see what's behind the back doors and what they're trying to hide from the public. And so it's just very shocking. And of course, your nerves are going crazy initially. It's always very very nerve-wracking, I think, in those first couple days.
Yeah, it's hard to imagine. Were you I mean, aside from the visceral shock of it being real as opposed to on film, were you surprised by what you found?
Yeah, absolutely. It's I think in every job I was always surprised. I thought, and it continues to surprise me that I continue to be surprised by the types of things that are found, But yeah, I didn't realize that in pet stores, for example, there's sick rooms in the back that's where they keep all the animals that they don't, who they don't want the public to see necessarily. And these animals, they languish back there with untreated injuries, illnesses. There's overcrowding issues, and there's transport situations that come in. So all of these things that we don't necessarily really think about in terms of any animal industry. We're just kind of shown what we're shown, and then we don't think past that.
Yeah, absolutely. How long do investigations generally last? How long are you doing these jobs, or does it vary tremendously?
It definitely varies depending on the industry. Could be a couple weeks, could be several months. I would say it's all across the board.
So, Mike, tell us about the investigation at Quality Pork Processors that you did for COK and what you uncovered about pigs. You talked about pig facilities, but this was specifically a pig slaughterhouse, right?
It was, yes. And it was, a very unique look into the industry, because there hasn't been a pork slaughter investigation in, several years. But it was unique for a lot of reasons. So Quality Pork Processors is an exclusive supplier to Hormel, and they take part in a pilot government program called HIMP. And that's an acronym within an acronym. It stands for Hazard Analysis Critical Controls Point-Based Inspection Models Project. Nobody can really understand what that means when you first read it. But essentially what it does, it drastically reduces the amount of government inspections, and it significantly increases the slaughter line speeds. So these workers often were taking inhumane shortcuts in order to keep up with the line speeds. And, they process about 19,000 pigs a day. And that's an astronomical number. But when you say that to people, you can't always get a really good grasp on that. So to kind of put that in perspective, there are 2 kill lines at Quality Pork Processors. And so they process about 1,300 pigs per hour. So each individual worker who's responsible for cutting the throat of a pig does that to about 650 pigs per hour. That comes down to about 1 pig every 5 seconds. So when you really think about that, and you think about how fast 5 seconds goes, every single 5 seconds there's a pig in front of you that you need to kill. And it's just an absolutely impossible time frame, for these workers who, when you're thinking about it towards the end of your shift, at the end of the week, if you're sick, if you're injured, if you just don't feel like being there, you're having a bad day, it's impossible. And that's why a lot of times, we see these pigs who are still alive, still conscious on the slaughter line, about to be scalded alive. And so we saw just a lot of incredibly egregious actions happening there. There was a lot of incredible abuse. There were a lot of downer pigs, and they endured the worst brutality because the workers were trying to get them up and move them. So anything you can imagine they were doing to these pigs. They were, hitting them, kicking them, shocking them in their face and genitals, pushing them, pulling them, dragging them, anything you could possibly think of. And so, there was just, from a lot of angles, there was a lot of abuse. And it definitely is very timely. So hemp is currently at 5 slaughter plants, 3 of which supply to Hormel. And the USDA is in the process of deciding if they're going to green light the expansion of hemp to every single pig slaughter plant in the U.S. They are in the process of deciding that. So we created a petition, our investigator, to the USDA, not only to not expand hemp, but to end it altogether. So I definitely would like to ask the listeners to please visit our website and check out our petition on Change and change.org, and we can, if they could add their voice to that, that'd be very helpful.
Yeah, that sounds like a great idea, because, of course, unlike most of the processes in animal agriculture, this is actually supposed to be a regulated process. There are laws that are supposed to, or there is a law that's supposed to be protecting these animals. So at least in that instance, you would expect there to be some response from the government. But from what you're saying, the USDA is drastically pulling back on that responsibility.
Absolutely, they are. And, there's been USDA whistleblowers who have come out talking against hemp, saying that food safety has gone down the drain. And it definitely has. In our video, you see, pigs' carcasses coming out covered in feces, riddled with pus-filled abscesses. It's just really gross what you see on these carcasses. And it's just, the food safety, it's not there. When the inspections can't happen because the speeds are so fast. One inspector said that, they ended up at one point just sitting back and watching the carcasses go by because they just can't take the time to end up inspecting them the way they used to.
Now, that's not an investigation that you did personally. Is that what you said?
No. So
yeah,
that
I
was,
misunderstood that.
I'm sorry. So that was a USDA whistleblower who said that.
Oh, okay.
So that was before our investigation came out. And the quality pork processors, I did not personally do that. That was one of our investigators who did that.
Well, I mean, I definitely still want to talk about it, but I just want to back up a little because, Lindsay, I feel like we didn't really cover all of the types of investigations you did. We talked about pet stores, but that was really just the beginning of your career. What other kinds of facilities were you in? And is there one in particular that really stands out as I can't say a bright memory, but a strong memory?
They're definitely memories for sure. Yeah, these are things that stay with you forever. So yeah, I guess I've done investigations into a broad range of industries. So pet stores, animal agriculture, zoos, circuses, research facilities. And in terms of things that stick out to me the most, I think from each individual investigation, there's always something that sticks out the most, particular individual animals who stay with you forever. Working with primates in research facilities, I think because of the close similarities to us was really an emotionally kind of psychologically challenging positions because of the depth of understanding that they go through. And so working with the same, in animal agriculture, it's the nature of animal agriculture is essentially animals come in, they're slaughtered, and and then they're eaten. But within research facilities, these animals are there for decades, just enduring this mistreatment. So working with them like that, it really, I guess I was able to know those individual animals for a longer amount of time.
Yeah, I can see how that would really impact you. Do either of you feel like you suffer from post-traumatic stress disorder from your work?
That's a really good question. It's something that I get a lot from applicants. And personally, I do not feel like I have. There's definitely some lasting, some things that stay with you. You definitely still think about some of the things you've done, especially standard practices. But it's something that I feel is really important. I definitely, for my investigators, I provide a counseling service that they can, utilize if they feel that's necessary. And for each individual investigator, it's definitely different.
Yeah, of course. What about you, Lindsay?
Yeah, and I think in the moment when you're working these jobs, it's incredibly challenging. There were certainly, would encounter nightmares, just different feelings of working these positions. But on a whole, I wouldn't say I have PTSD because, undercover investigations really are vital in exposing the inherent abuse that goes on in these industries. And so just keeping in that positive mindset, knowing that we're working to create change and that it's working is really a big motivator. So basically just focusing on moving forward and not dwelling on the past.
Yeah, I can see how that would really help, though. I think it also takes a very special kind of person to be able to do a person who loves animals enough to want to do this and yet can manage to not be to tolerate it not tolerate it and like it's okay, but to not be affected in a really damaging way by it. And it does take special people. And I'm not sure that they're common, but you both now manage other people who are doing this work. What do you look for when you're looking to hire an undercover investigator?
The magical question. Honestly, it depends. There's no really specific mold that you look for. It really just depends on the individual's personality, and there's a lot of things that drive people away from the job. And you've really hit the nail on the head with people who are compassionate towards animals. For the most part, do not want to take part in somebody's actions, and not just witnessing it, but taking part in it. And that's something that a lot of people don't fully realize, that you have to perform the standard practices. And there's other things as well. The travel and the long days and everything that push people away. Then out of that, the people who are left, it just really depends on their personality and the amount of drive and determination and effort that I feel that they would put into it.
So, do you have anything to add, Lindsay?
Yeah, I mean, what he said is relatively accurate there. Everyone comes from all different backgrounds, all different walks of life. And of course, having, that dedication, drive to do this, that's what really keeps you going in the field. If I were to view this as just a normal 9-to-5 job, I could see it not lasting by any means. It takes that. There were definitely days where you have this feeling that, oh, I can't continue. I just, this is so hard. And, but for me, I then kind of reversed it and I thought about, the animals in those situations. And I was able to leave that place and go home, go wherever I'm staying and have a bed to sleep in. Whereas those animals are there for their entire lives enduring this. And so that really is the motivator that helped keep me going.
For people who are out there who are considering wanting to do this, who really care passionately about animals and think this would be a good use of their skills, what kind of advice would you give them?
This is a good question. So I think I definitely to take in as many videos as they can. And, as I mentioned before, watching all the videos really does not, it pales in comparison to actually being there. But I still have people applying who tell me, oh, I've watched the videos and I started crying, or I couldn't make it through them all. And, if that's the case, you need to really put yourself in that position and get to that point where you can watch them all, where, you can sit through, watch them, not cry, not show emotion.
I already think I can't do this. Not that I would really be eligible, but I don't think I can do it.
Yeah. And a lot of people come to that decision on their own. The vast majority of people
If you can't watch the videos, you probably shouldn't apply for the job.
Right.
Yeah, it takes a lot, and that's how most people feel about this job when they hear about it and what goes into it. They're like, that sounds terrible. It sounds awful. I don't want anything to do with that. But on the flip side of things, it's so incredibly rewarding. If you feel that, you're one of the few individuals who are able to go in these environments, document the cruelty that happens on a day-to-day basis to millions of animals, then helping and creating that change is really powerful. It's very moving to be able to make that difference.
Yeah, I think it's the most important work being done, and anybody who thinks they can do it, I really congratulate them, and it's heroic. It really is. And one of the things that's heroic about it is that it's kind of risky. Have either of you gotten close to being found out?
Well, so not necessarily close to being found out. You definitely have some hairy situations at times. When I was at the zoo, I was in a pen with 2 lions, and they were not full grown, but they were a couple 100 pounds each. And I was bringing meat in for them, and they started kind of playing a little rough. And I was backing up towards the the door of the pen, and one of them ripped my pants, and so all of my equipment just fell out.
Oh my God!
And, so I jumped on top of it, and no one ended up seeing anything. There actually was another zoo worker nearby, and I just yelled for her to go get more meat to kind of bring the lions to the other side. So no one ended up finding out. That's the only time that something like that happened. As you go along in your investigations career, you definitely find that you get a little more cocky and you start taking more risks. So there were times when I probably took a little additional risk, a little more than I should have, but no one ever caught me or anything like that.
Yeah, there's definitely an element of risk when doing this job, and I think that men and women, we both have kind of different things to worry about when working in this industry, or any of these industries, really. But I've had close calls for sure, where there were times when people maybe walked in at moments where they shouldn't have walked in at, and of course that arrogance thing that Mike mentioned is certainly when you start doing this for a while, you sort of have that feeling, but then of course you need to really humble yourself in those moments, and of course remember why you're there, and getting caught is a really worst case scenario that shouldn't happen to anyone.
Right, and that's a good point. It definitely shouldn't. And these days, it's so rare. Things are different. Back when we were in the field, everything was much different. Technology has changed a lot. So, These days you could pretty much count on people not getting caught. But it's always in the back of your mind. It's like one of those worst case scenarios that you always run through in your mind.
Lindsay, you mentioned there are different risks for men and women. Can you expand on that?
Yeah, well, in terms of men, of course, have different things to worry about in terms of just working with different employees, perhaps being challenged by other individuals. Women, we have to worry about safety. Not to say that men don't have to worry about safety situations, but you never know what types of individuals you could be working with. There were times where I was working alone on a property, and I would work overnight shifts. I was behind a locked gate with just all men. And so there were just things that are kind of in your mind in terms of, if I got caught in this situation, what would happen in the middle of nowhere at night where there's a dead animal pile in the back corner of the property.
So that brings up the question, which you alluded to before, of the other workers. Can you give, there probably isn't an overview because there are probably many different stories among people who work in these places, but what is it like? What is the culture like? What are the people like?
It's very different. It really, I would say, depends on the industry that you're working in, the areas that you're working, the different, parts of the country that you're working in. I always kind of thought in going in that, these have to be all horrible people working in these industries, but that's very much not the case. I worked with a lot of individuals who were nice, caring individuals. Now, on the flip side of that, a lot of times they'll be nice to humans, but not so much nice to animals. It's kind of a different mentality, different way of thinking. Now, I did work with different individuals who were caring toward the animals and who would disagree with situations that were happening. But within animal agriculture specifically, there's just a culture of violence in that industry that that's part of the industry. And so that's really an ongoing thing. We're seeing constant cases. All of our investigations are exposing just really malicious abuse to the animals.
That's really horrifying. How about you, Mike? How have you found the people to be?
Yeah, and that's a really great question. And I think that, as Lindsay mentioned, most people, before you go into these places, think that these workers are all just wicked and evil, and that's really not the case. A lot of them are just your everyday people living next door. They need to, have a job, put food on the table for their families. And as she mentioned, there is definitely a culture of violence, and especially within animal ag. The standard practices really give these workers, I call it kind of like a mind warp, and you start to view things as not so bad. And so there definitely are people who are sadistic and who really abuse the animals and take out their frustrations on them. One of my hog farm cases, there were 6 workers who were charged, and some of them definitely were sadistic. But some of them, it's more so they just took a job there, and throughout the time of being there, they, performing the standard practices, having to work at such a fast pace, especially when you're moving animals. Whenever you're in a factory farm, when you're moving animals, that's typically when you're going to see a lot of abuse. So when you're moving sows, they don't always want to go where you want them to go. And when you don't hit them, it really makes you stand out. So a lot of these workers end up falling into that mindset, and they start hitting them and kicking them and trying to get them to move. And what was pretty eye-opening for me, after that case, there was an interview that came out with some of those workers, and one of them, he was very ashamed, and he was very, he was crying in the interview, and he couldn't believe that that's what he did and that's how he acted. And it's really eye-opening to take a look at how it affects these workers to be in these industries and to be working. They start doing these things that in any other situation they can never really picture themselves doing. And I think that really shows how much of a systemic issue it is.
That is a fascinating insight. It really is. Everyone knows this. Humans get caught up in a culture and do what other people around them are doing. And it really is almost abusive to these workers to put them into a culture that they do things that later, when they think about it, at least some of them, probably not all of them, but at least some of them feel such shame. It's fascinating. Lindsay, you mentioned some undercover investigations that you did yourself, but you're now a supervisor. What what would you say are one or two of Mercy for Animals' more recent investigations that you're particularly proud of?
Yeah, so our recent investigation was at an egg farm that supplies to Eggland's Best. And we encountered their birds who are kept in battery cages, which are just, it's such a very extreme small confinement for birds to be shelved into these conditions. So that's a major issue that we're actually seeing a lot of positive changes coming from corporations who are eliminating things like battery cages. But Eggland's Best is still in support of battery cages. And so our investigation exposed, birds who were rotting in cages with still living birds who are laying eggs for eventually consumers, birds who were violently ripped out of their cages, being thrown into trash cans to then essentially be gassed to death. So we're calling on Eggland's Best to eliminate battery cages, and it would be fantastic if people listening could go to our website, go to egglandsworst.com and sign and share that petition.
Yeah, that's a great use of an undercover investigation to try to get that changed, because at least I think there's still a lot of facilities around the country that have promised to stop using battery cages that haven't yet done it, but at least they have promised to.
Yeah, definitely. We're seeing, and on the corporate level, we're seeing a lot of corporations adopting these improved animal welfare standards. One of those actually just a couple days ago, Purdue announced the most comprehensive animal welfare policy ever adopted by a major chicken producer. And this follows some of our investigations into Purdue contract farms. So it goes to show that corporations are listening, they're paying attention, and they're creating change for animals.
Yeah, well, some change is happening. Not enough, but some change is happening, and it's a result of these investigations. I know, Mike, that one of the investigations that I think you oversaw, I don't think it's one you personally did, was Foster Farms. And in particular, I think that you discovered some contradictions about their humane certifications. Can you talk about that a bit?
Absolutely, yeah, and that is one that I oversaw. So that was one of our investigators who she actually is going to law school now, Crystal, and she'll be, once she gets out of law school, then she'll be continuing her advocacy on the legal side of things. So while we're there, there's so much interest in recent years into humane meat. And so Foster Farms is a humane certified company. They were in the certification process while we were there. The AHA was there. There was an inspector there while Crystal worked there. And there were significant procedural differences from the inspector was there to when they weren't. The manner in which the workers were conducting, the standard practices. Even things such as the lighting and the music was different when the inspector was there.
Oh, my God.
Exactly. There were also, everybody knew who the inspector was and where they were at the time. So if you have someone who is going to abuse an animal, if you're talking about a humane certified company, they get that certification with an inspector walking through. If a worker knows where the inspector is, obviously they're not going to hit an animal right in front of them. So it's kind of, in my mind, it's just completely pointless to certify them. But what we found at Foster Farms, there was just one of the worst things I would say is the suffocation process. So the injured and sick birds would be culled, and then they were either macerated, ground up alive, or they were suffocated, and that kind of depends on where they were in the process. So for the birds who were suffocated, they would take 25 birds, they would pile them into these cheap plastic bags, seal them up, and these bags were so cheap that the birds' beaks would tear little tiny holes in them, which would allow air to draft in. And there were times when Crystal would go back there and the bag would be sealed for over an hour, and there were still birds who were gasping for air and chirping. She would go to her supervisor to report this, and every single time she was told very plainly just to get back to work. Sometimes workers would go back there and they would see these birds inside these bags still gasping for air after long periods of time. And they would tear the bag open and they would just dump all the birds into a new bag. Half the birds would be dead, half would be alive, and they would just start the process all over again. It's just a really incredibly egregious process. In addition to the other standard practices of debeaking and detowing, which her manager jokingly and callously referred to as a nose job station and a manicure station. So it kind of goes to show the mindset that these people have sometimes when they're working in these situations.
Yeah, it's just horrifying. Hasn't there been some progress on the whole suffocation of male chicks, which is just so, like, it must do insane things to the people who do that. To imagine doing that to these helpless animals day after day. But hasn't there been some progress on that? That there's going to the proposal to adopt identifying within the egg who the male chicks are?
There has been. That came out pretty recently, and that's actually for the maceration. So they will be able to identify the males and then avoid, macerating them after on their first day of life, which is essentially just a giant blender they throw them into. So there is definitely some progress that they're working towards on that, and that definitely has come about from, I would say, from all the investigations showing the maceration footage and creating a big public outcry about that.
Yeah, absolutely. They certainly wouldn't have made these changes without these investigations, which brings it, there's been a lot of investigations and there are a lot of ongoing investigations. Is it getting harder to get press on these investigations as there are more and more of them?
On the contrary, I actually think it's easier now compared to it was back then because, when Lindsay and I were in the field, it was... When I first went into the field, MySpace was more popular than Facebook. Things were much different back then.
I think you're older than I am.
Things were very different then. So it's, back then, it was definitely, we were able to get media and coverage. But these days, with the videos going viral and on social media, just everything really, everything moves a lot faster. And so I feel like these days media is actually a lot easier to get. And then once it starts picking up, it starts spiraling really fast.
Lindsay, how does Mercy for Animals use these videos in addition to trying to get press? What are the ways you get the word out?
Well, of course, education is really key. And like Mike mentioned, in terms of where social media has led, it opens the door to be able to share videos with our friends and family who wouldn't have otherwise seen this information. And so we're seeing a lot of a really big response from people for that. Meat consumption, dairy consumption has been down for nearly a decade now. So education is certainly key. We also use legal advocacy to strengthen animal protection laws and, of course, hold animal abusers accountable. And then by working with companies to improve their animal welfare standards.
So, Mike, I noticed that COK had used some undercover footage rather imaginatively in the spam campaign. Can you talk about that?
Absolutely. Thank you for bringing that up. Hormel has a spam tour, a Spam American tour that they did where they have a Hormel bus and they drive around the country. They went to, the number escapes me, maybe 15 or 20 different cities trying to promote spam. So to parody that, we created our spam tour, and we created this likable cartoon character, Earl, to show people the real spam tour and how it's made and really what goes into it. And so it's been our quality pork processors video is it's reached millions and millions and millions of people, and I think. Just being able to repackage it like that, it's really important because, it's able to reach more people who hadn't seen it initially. The messages have just been flooding in from people who've seen it, and it's just opened their eyes, and they're going to go vegetarian or start reducing their meat consumption at least, or, take steps in the right direction. So it's definitely, the spam tour, it tries to put, slightly, not so much comical, but it's more tongue-in-cheek, and it tries to put a slightly different view on our quality pork processors investigation.
Yeah, and in doing so, it might get people to watch it who might, I don't want to use the word trick, but it might get people to watch it who might not otherwise, be willing to watch it, which is great. I must say, in the deepest, darkest days of my meat eating, never once did I taste spam.
I have not either. And it's funny, during our Hormel case, when I would go to the grocery store, I went and took a look at the spam aisle, and it amazes me at how many spam products there are. Like, I don't think I've ever eaten it, but back then, I think I just remember seeing like there's a couple cans. I mean, there's just row after row after row of spam products. It's
Ew.
quite gross. Yeah.
Ew. Yeah, I'll have to. I had no idea. I thought it was just spam.
Yeah. No, there's. I mean, so many products. They try to package it into so many different things.